For a long time, I was a book broker and collector. I guess I'm still a collector, but I don't hunt for books for other people anymore. It was in the early 80s when I had an experience with the paranormal. I was living in Bend, Oregon, and I had always wondered if the older books I found held anything unusual in them. Books are a very strange thing. People become very attached to them. I've had a few books over time that I felt had a strange aura around them. I never told anyone about that because I thought they might think I was crazy. To be honest, I wasn't sure that was even quite possible. That is, until I bought the Beasts of Tarzan book. I purchased the Tarzan book from an estate sale. I love to go to estate sales to see what rare gem I could find. Tarzan books aren't super rare, but this one was in excellent condition. It had a beautiful light green cover, and as I looked through it, I found a name and date written in pencil in the back, Benjamin, 1920. I paid for the book and left for home. When I got to my house, I put the book on my desk and forgot about it. The very next morning, I got up and headed to the kitchen to get some breakfast. When I passed my office, I noticed that the book was on the floor. In fact, it looked like it had been placed on the floor. It was open as if someone had been reading it. I found this very odd. I live alone except for my dog, and he had been with me all night. I picked the book up and looked at it. I was afraid that if it had fallen off my desk, it could have damaged the spine, as old as it was, and I breathed a sigh of relief when I realized it was okay. I shook it off and figured I had accidentally bumped it off my desk. However, over the next few weeks, I found the book 4 more times on the floor. It was always in the same spot on the floor and was always turned to the same pages. After the 4th time, I decided to put the book in my old trunk. The trunk was in the corner of my office, and it's where I kept some of my more valuable books under lock and key. It was quiet for a few days, so I forgot all about the book. Then, one evening, I was reading a book before going to bed when my dog jumped up as if he heard a noise. His hackles were raised, and he started to growl at the hallway. At first, I couldn't hear anything. Then, I heard it. It was a deep thudding. I walked down the hall and could hear the thumping was coming from my office. I opened the door and realized that the hollow thud was the sound of someone pounding on my old trunk in the corner of the room. I reached into the room to turn on the light, and suddenly the sound stopped. I walked over to the trunk, but couldn't see any signs of anyone having been there. I got the key from my desk drawer and opened it, half expecting an animal to jump out. As I opened the lid, I found nothing out of the ordinary. I closed the lid and looked around. I was stumped as to what could have caused the banging. I checked all the doors and windows and finally went back to bed. I had just gotten back to bed when I heard the banging starting up again. I ran down the hall with my dog at my heels, and as I opened the office door again, it stopped. I left the light on in the office and went back to bed. The sound didn't come back that night, but my mind was running wild, trying to figure out what was going on. Things were quiet for about a week. Then one night, I was startled out of a deep sleep when the door to my bedroom was flung open and my dog started barking at the hallway. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the phone, thinking I had an intruder. I was just about to dial 911 when I heard the distinctly familiar sound of the trunk being hammered on. That's when I knew it wasn't an intruder. I walked down the hall and, just as before, turned on the light to the office and the banging stopped. I was both terrified and stumped. I was starting to wonder what I had brought into my home to cause this. It was another week without any sound from my new ghost friend. I was just beginning to believe it may have left me alone for good, but I was wrong. I had gone to bed and had fallen asleep. I remember rolling over in bed when the smell of burning wood permeated my nose. I was trying to figure out if I was awake or dreaming when a new horrible burnt smell hit me. I sat up in bed and reached for my lamp. Just before turning it on, I froze with a gasp. Standing right next to my bed was a boy, about 10 years old. He had on clothes from another era. The left side of his body was burned black. I could see one of his eyes was burned out, and there were tendrils of smoke drifting up from his smoldering clothes. I could see a few red cinders burning in his shirt. I realized the horrible burning smell was that of burning hair. I was horrified and unable to move. He looked at me with an angry, almost accusing look. He started to speak, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. He looked at me again, and with considerable effort, he spoke aloud this time. I could hear him in a soft, raspy voice. "You took my book." He leaned in closer to me and again spoke. "You took my book." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was looking at Benjamin, the owner of the Tarzan book, and in a single moment, he vanished. The next thing I remember was waking in the morning. I was still so terrified. I got up and retrieved the book. I sat in the kitchen, shaking from my experience. I didn't know what to do, but I knew without a doubt this book wasn't going to spend one more night in my house. It happened to be Sunday morning, so I dressed and went for a drive. I felt that if I destroyed the book, Benjamin might stay at my home, and I didn't want that. So I called a friend of mine who was also a book broker. I met him that afternoon and explained what I experienced. At first, I thought he might think I was crazy, but he listened intently. He explained he had also had a similar experience once, and he had found a gentleman who collected books just like this one. He explained he thought the guy would love the Tarzan book. My friend offered to take the book with him, and I told him if he took the book, he was welcome to the entire sale of it. I handed him the book and went back home. I'm happy to say I never experienced another incident. I don't know what happened to Benjamin, how he died, or why he was so attached to that book. Not long after this, I started renting a storage unit for all my older books. I have Benjamin to thank for that.